The sun beat down mercilessly on Catherine Jameson's shoulders as he rode his chestnut mare through the narrow passages of Palo Duro Canyon, searching for the half-dozen cattle that had wandered from his ranch 3 days prior. The year was 1876, and the Texas Panhandle was still wild enough that a man could lose himself in these red rock formations if he didn't know the land. Catherine, who went by Kit to anyone who'd speak to him, knew every crevice and shadow of this canyon. He'd been ranching these lands alone for the past 5 years, ever since his father had died and left him the property just outside Canyon City, Texas. At 28 years old, Kit had resigned himself to a solitary existence. The nearest town was a hard ride away, and most of his days were spent mending fences, tending livestock, and talking to his dog, a loyal shepherd mix named Copper. He'd grown accustomed to the silence, to the way his own thoughts echoed in the empty rooms of the ranch house his grandfather had built with his own hands. Romance seemed like something for other men, men who had time to court and charm. Kit had a ranch to run. The canyon walls rose steep and magnificent around him, painted in shades of rust and ochre by millennia of wind and water. He was following fresh tracks when he heard it, a sound so unexpected in this desolate place that he nearly dismissed it as his imagination playing tricks. But there it was again, a woman's voice, hoarse and desperate, calling for help. Kit urged his mare forward, guiding her carefully around a sharp bend in the canyon floor. That's when he saw her, a figure in a torn blue dress, stumbling along the rocky ground, her dark hair hanging loose and tangled around her face. She looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, and even from a distance, Kit could see the relief wash over her features. He dismounted quickly, grabbing his canteen as he approached. "Madam, are you hurt?" The woman's legs seemed to give out, and Kit caught her just before she hit the ground. Up close, he could see that her face was sunburned, her lips cracked and bleeding. She tried to speak, but only a raspy whisper emerged. "Easy now," Kit said, uncorking the canteen and holding it to her lips. "Small sips. You've been out here a while, haven't you?" She drank greedily, and he had to pull the canteen away to keep her from making herself sick. Her eyes, a striking green even in her exhausted state, met his with gratitude. "Thank you," she managed, her voice still rough. "I thought I was going to die out here." "What happened? Where did you come from?" Kit asked, scanning the canyon for any sign of a wagon or horse. "My name is Catherine Vaughn," she said, accepting another small sip of water. "I was traveling with a wagon train to California. We stopped to make camp 2 nights ago, maybe 3, I've lost track. I went to gather firewood and got turned around. By the time I realized I was lost, I couldn't find my way back. I've been walking ever since." Kit frowned. He hadn't heard about any wagon trains passing through the area, but it was possible they'd taken a route further north. "Can you ride? My ranch isn't far. We'll get you fed and rested, then figure out how to find your people." Catherine nodded, and Kit helped her to her feet. She was unsteady, leaning heavily against him as they made their way to his mare. He mounted first, then pulled her up to sit in front of him. She was light, too light, and he could feel her trembling with exhaustion. "Hold on," he said, wrapping one arm around her waist to steady her. "The canyon can be rough going, but I've got you." As they began the journey back to his ranch, Catherine slumped against his chest. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and Kit realized she'd fallen into an exhausted sleep. He adjusted his hold on her, making sure she wouldn't fall, and guided his mare with practiced ease through the winding passages of the canyon. The ride took nearly 2 hours, and by the time Kit's ranch came into view, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. The property wasn't much to look at, just a sturdy wooden house, a barn, and several corrals, but it was home. Copper came bounding up as they approached, barking a greeting before settling down when Kit shushed him. Catherine stirred as they came to a stop. "Where are we?" "My ranch," Kit said, dismounting carefully and reaching up to help her down. "You're safe here. Let's get you inside." The house was modest but clean. Kit led Catherine to the main room, which served as both kitchen and living space, and settled her into the only comfortable chair he owned, an old rocker that had been his mother's. He quickly set about building up the fire in the stove and putting on a pot of coffee. "I've got some stew from yesterday," he said, ladling the thick mixture into a bowl. "It's not fancy, but it'll put some strength back in you." Catherine accepted the bowl with shaking hands. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger. Kit watched her, noting the way her dress, though dirty and torn, was made of fine material. Her hands, despite being scratched and bruised, showed signs of care. This was a woman who'd known comfort before finding herself lost in the canyon. "Thank you," she said again when the bowl was empty. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." "No need to dwell on that," Kit replied. "You're here now. Tomorrow we'll ride into Canyon City and see if anyone knows about your wagon train. The telegraph office can send messages. We'll find your people." Catherine's expression shifted, becoming harder to read. "Yes, of course, my people." Kit noticed the change but didn't press. Instead, he said, "You should rest. I'll give you my room for tonight. I can bed down out here." "I couldn't possibly take your room," Catherine protested. "You can and you will," Kit said firmly but kindly. "Come on, I'll show you." The bedroom was small, containing just a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. Kit poured fresh water into the basin and found a clean towel. "There's a nightshirt in the top drawer if you want something more comfortable to sleep in. I'll have to see about getting you some proper clothes tomorrow." Catherine looked around the simple room, and to Kit's surprise, tears began streaming down her cheeks. She wiped at them hastily. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm crying now. You've been through an ordeal," Kit said gently. "Tears are allowed." She looked at him then, really looked at him, taking in his weathered face, his kind eyes, the way he stood awkwardly in the doorway of his own bedroom trying to give her space. "You're a good man, Mr. Jameson." "Kit," he corrected. "And I'm just doing what anyone would do." After ensuring she had everything she needed, Kit retreated to the main room. He poured himself some coffee and settled into the wooden chair at his small dining table. Copper curled up at his feet, and Kit absently scratched the dog's ears as he contemplated the unexpected turn his day had taken. Catherine Vaughn was beautiful, even exhausted and disheveled. But more than that, there was something about her that called to him, a spark of intelligence in her eyes, a strength in the way she carried herself despite her ordeal. He shook his head, dismissing such thoughts. She was just passing through, heading to California with her wagon train. In a day or two, she'd be gone, and his life would return to its familiar solitude. The next morning, Kit woke early as always, his back stiff from sleeping in the chair. He started the fire and put on a fresh pot of coffee, then went outside to tend to his morning chores. The cattle he'd been searching for would have to wait another day. Right now, his priority was helping Catherine find her people. When he came back inside an hour later, he found her standing at the stove, carefully tending to a pan of eggs. She'd washed and braided her hair and was wearing his nightshirt, which hung comically large on her frame. She looked up when he entered, offering a tentative smile. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I wanted to make myself useful." "I don't mind at all," Kit replied, surprised and pleased. "Though you should be resting." "I've done enough resting," Catherine said, "and I wanted to thank you properly for your kindness." They ate breakfast together, a simple meal of eggs, bread, and coffee, but it felt strangely domestic to Kit. He couldn't remember the last time he'd shared breakfast with another person. Catherine seemed more herself this morning, color returning to her cheeks, though she still moved stiffly, her muscles no doubt sore from her ordeal. "So," Kit said, setting down his coffee cup, "tell me about this wagon train of yours. When did you leave from, and where were you headed exactly?" Catherine's hands stilled on her own cup. For a long moment, she didn't speak, and Kit wondered if she'd heard him. Then she looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "I need to tell you the truth," she said quietly. "There is no wagon train." Kit felt his eyebrows rise. "What do you mean?" "I was traveling alone in a hired wagon with a driver," Catherine explained, the words coming faster now. "We were heading to Austin, not California." "The driver, a man named Henderson, he seemed respectable enough when I hired him in Kansas. But once we were on the road, away from civilization, he started making advances. When I refused him, he became angry. 2 days ago, he left me in the canyon. Said if I wouldn't be his woman, I could find my own way." Kit felt anger rising in his chest. "He abandoned you, left you to die." "I suppose he thought I'd change my mind, come crawling back," Catherine said bitterly. "I tried to find my way out, but I just got more lost. And then you found me." "Why Austin?" Kit asked. "What's there for you?" Catherine's expression grew distant. "A fresh start. I had a position waiting for me, teaching at a school for girls. I sold everything I had back in Lawrence, Kansas, to make the journey. My parents died last year, both of them within 3 months of each other. There was nothing left for me there but memories." Kit understood loneliness when he heard it. "We still need to report what Henderson did. A man like that shouldn't be allowed to prey on women." "I know," Catherine agreed. "But Kit, I need to ask you something. The position in Austin, it's likely already been filled by now. I was supposed to arrive 3 weeks ago, and I have no money left, nothing. Henderson took my trunk with all my belongings when he abandoned me. What are you asking?" Catherine took a deep breath. "Could I stay here just for a little while? I'll work to earn my keep, cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. Just until I can figure out what to do next." Kit should have said no. Having a woman stay at his ranch, even temporarily, would set tongues wagging in Canyon City. But looking at Catherine, seeing the combination of fear and hope in her eyes, he found himself nodding. "You can stay," he said. "As long as you need." The relief on her face was palpable. "Thank you. You won't regret this, I promise." Kit wasn't sure about that, but the decision was made. They spent the rest of the morning in practical matters. Kit had some old clothes that had belonged to his mother, stored in a trunk in the barn. They were outdated, but Catherine was grateful for the split skirt and simple blouses, clothes more suitable for ranch life than her torn dress. "Your mother had good taste," Catherine said, running her hand over the fabric of a dark green blouse. "She was a practical woman," Kit replied. "Had to be, living out here. She died when I was 12, fever took her in the winter." "I'm sorry," Catherine said softly. "It was a long time ago," Kit said, though the loss still ached sometimes. "Come on, I'll show you around the property. If you're going to be staying here, you should know the lay of the land." The ranch wasn't large by Texas standards, just 100 acres of decent grazing land, but Kit was proud of it. He showed Catherine the barn, where his mare and 2 other horses were stabled, along with the milk cow that provided fresh milk and butter. There were chickens in a coop behind the house, scratching and pecking at the ground. "I usually collect the eggs in the morning," Kit explained. "The cow needs milking twice a day. And there's a garden behind the house, though it's not doing much this late in the season." Catherine listened attentively, asking questions about the daily routine. She had a quick mind, Kit noticed, grasping things immediately and showing genuine interest. They were standing by the corral, watching Kit's small herd of cattle grazing in the distance, when Catherine spoke again. "Why do you do this alone?" Surely a ranch requires more than one person to run properly. Kit leaned against the fence rail. I had a hand helping me up until last year, but he got married and moved to Colorado with his new wife. I've been meaning to hire someone new, but it's hard to find good help out here. Most young men want to be cowboys, driving cattle up to Kansas, not working a small ranch. And the pay I can offer isn't much. It must be lonely, Catherine observed. Kit glanced at her, finding her watching him with those penetrating green eyes. It is sometimes, but it's what I know. My grandfather built this place from nothing, my father expanded it, and now it's mine to keep going. That means something. I understand that, Catherine said. Holding on to something your family built, it matters. They fell into an easy routine over the next few days. Catherine proved to be a hard worker, rising early to help with the morning chores. She took over the cooking, and Kit was amazed by how much better his meals became. She had a talent for making simple ingredients taste remarkable. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, they'd sit on the porch and talk. Kit learned that Catherine was 24, that she'd been a schoolteacher in Lawrence before her parents died. She loved books, could quote poetry from memory, and had dreams of one day writing a book of her own. About what? Kit asked, genuinely curious. About women making their way in the West, Catherine said. Real stories, not the dime novel nonsense, about the challenges and the triumphs, the loneliness and the freedom. You should write it, Kit said. I'd read it. Catherine laughed, a sound Kit was growing fond of. Would you really? A rough rancher like you reading a book about women? I'm not that rough, Kit protested, smiling. I can read just fine. My mother made sure of that. She believed education was important even out here. She was right, Catherine said softly. As the days turned into a week, Kit found himself looking forward to these evening conversations more than anything else in his day. Catherine was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, and genuinely interested in his thoughts and opinions. She asked him about ranching, about his childhood, about his dreams for the future. I want to expand, Kit admitted one evening. Build up the herd, maybe buy some of the adjoining land, but it takes capital I don't have yet. You'll get there, Catherine said with confidence. You're smart and hardworking. Those qualities count for a lot. Kit felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. It had been a long time since anyone had expressed such faith in him. It was Catherine who suggested they ride into Canyon City the following week. She needed proper clothes of her own, and Kit needed supplies. More importantly, they needed to report what had happened with Henderson, though neither held much hope that the man would be found. Canyon City was a small town, consisting of a main street with a general store, a saloon, a bank, a telegraph office, and a handful of other establishments. As Kit and Catherine rode in together, Kit was acutely aware of the curious stares they attracted. He helped Catherine down from her horse in front of the general store, and they were immediately approached by Martha Kenmore, the banker's wife and the town's most dedicated gossip. Kit Jameson, who is this lovely young lady? Martha asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. Mrs. Kenmore, this is Miss Catherine Vaughn, Kit said politely. She had some trouble on the road and I've been helping her out. Trouble on the road? Martha's eyebrows rose. My dear, you must tell me everything. Catherine handled the interrogation with grace, explaining about Henderson and her abandonment in the canyon in a way that was truthful but not overly detailed. Martha was appropriately scandalized. That horrible man. Kit, you must report this to the sheriff immediately. That's our next stop, madam, Kit assured her. Inside the general store, Kit watched as Catherine carefully selected a few basic items. 2 dresses, some undergarments, a nightgown, and a warm shawl. She kept track of the prices in her head, and when she came to the counter, she looked at Kit with worry in her eyes. "It's too much," she whispered. "I can't let you spend this much on me." "Consider it an advance on your wages," Kit replied quietly. "You've been earning your keep and then some." The storekeeper, an older man named Tom Fletcher, was watching them with interest. "Kit Jameson, I never thought I'd see the day you'd be buying women's clothes. This young lady must be something special." Kit felt heat rising in his face. "Miss Vaughn is staying at the ranch temporarily, helping with the household duties." Of course," Tom said, though his tone suggested he thought otherwise. At the sheriff's office, they found Sheriff William Porter, a grizzled man in his 50s who'd been keeping the peace in Canyon City for over a decade. He listened to Catherine's story with a serious expression, occasionally asking questions. "This Henderson fellow, can you describe him?" The sheriff asked. Catherine did, providing as many details as she could remember. The sheriff wrote it all down, though he looked skeptical about the chances of finding the man. "The problem is, madam, he could be anywhere by now. And unless someone else reports seeing him or he causes trouble somewhere, there's not much I can do. I'll send out some notices to other towns, but I can't promise anything." "I understand," Catherine said. "I just wanted it on record in case he does this to another woman." "That's smart thinking," the sheriff said, then turned his attention to Kit. "You're sure about having Miss Vaughn stay at your place? People are going to talk, you know that." "Let them talk," Kit said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Miss Vaughn needs help and I'm providing it. There's nothing improper about it." The sheriff held up his hands. "I'm not suggesting there is, just warning you about what folks might say." On the ride back to the ranch, Catherine was quiet. Kit let the silence stretch between them for a while before finally asking what was on her mind. "I'm causing problems for you," she said. "With your reputation in town." "My reputation can handle it," Kit replied. "Besides, I don't much care what people think." "You should care," Catherine insisted. "You have to live in that town, do business there. I should leave, find somewhere else to go." Kit felt his heart clench at the thought. "Is that what you want, to leave?" Catherine looked at him, and there was something in her eyes Kit couldn't quite read. "No," she said softly. "It's not what I want at all." They didn't speak much the rest of the way home, but something had shifted between them. Kit could feel it, a new awareness, a tension that was both exciting and terrifying. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Catherine spoke up. "Kit, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Why haven't you married? You're a good man with a solid property. There must have been women interested." Kit was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I came close once," he finally said. "About 6 years ago. There was a girl in town, Sarah Preston. We courted for a while and I thought we'd marry. But she ended up choosing a merchant from Amarillo instead. Said she didn't want to be a rancher's wife, stuck out in the middle of nowhere." "Her loss," Catherine said firmly. Kit looked at her in surprise. "You think so? I know so," Catherine said. "This place, it's beautiful. Yes, it's isolated, but there's a peace here, a simplicity. Some people would kill for this kind of life." "What about you?" Kit asked, his heart beating faster. "Is this the kind of life you could see yourself living?" Catherine met his gaze, and in the fading light her eyes seemed to glow. "Yes," she said simply. "I could." Kit wanted to reach for her hand to pull her close, but he held himself back. It was too soon, too complicated. She'd only been here 2 weeks, and she'd been through a traumatic experience. Any feelings she might be developing could just be gratitude or the aftermath of trauma. He wouldn't take advantage of that. But as the days continued to pass, Kit found it increasingly difficult to maintain his emotional distance. Catherine fit into his life so seamlessly, it was as if she'd always been there. She sang while she worked, bringing music into a house that had been silent for too long. She laughed at his jokes and challenged his opinions, making him think about things in new ways. One afternoon, Kit was working in the barn, repairing a broken stall door when Catherine came in carrying a basket. "I brought you some lunch," she said, setting the basket down on a hay bale. "You've been out here all morning." "Thanks," Kit said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I wanted to get this finished before it got too hot." Catherine wandered around the barn, running her hand along the walls. "This is good construction. Your grandfather built this too." "Him and my father together," Kit said. "Took them 2 summers." "It's lasted well," Catherine observed. She turned to look at Kit, and there was something in her expression that made his breath catch. "Everything here has lasted well, because it was built with care and maintained with dedication." Kit set down his tools. "Catherine, what are we doing here?" "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," Kit said, taking a step closer. "These past few weeks, the way we've been dancing around each other, I need to know if I'm imagining things or if you feel it too." Catherine's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "You're not imagining things." "Then what do we do about it?" Kit asked. "Because I have to tell you, Catherine, I'm falling in love with you, and it scares the hell out of me." Her eyes widened. "You are, how could I not?" Kit said, the words flowing now that he'd started. "You're smart and funny and kind. You make this old house feel like a home again. You make me want to be better, to build something more than just a ranch. But I know it's soon, and I know you've been through a lot, and if I'm pushing too hard, you need to tell me." Catherine closed the distance between them, reaching up to touch his face. "You're not pushing too hard. Kit, I never wanted to leave after that first day. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, how to make you see that I'm not just grateful, I'm happy. Happier than I've been in years." Kit covered her hand with his own, turning his face to kiss her palm. "Stay with me, not as a hired hand or a temporary guest. Stay with me as my wife." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Catherine's voice trembled. "I know I should do this proper, should court you right, but I've never been good at following the rules," Kit said. "Yes, I'm asking you to marry me. I love you, Catherine. I want to build a life with you right here on this land." "Yes," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." Kit pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, hardly believing this was real. He'd woken up this morning thinking he'd spend another day working his ranch alone, and now he had a future he'd never dared to imagine. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Canyon City. The wedding was simple, attended by the few townspeople Kit was friendly with and Catherine had met. Catherine wore a new dress, pale blue with white lace, that Kit had bought her from the general store. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers Kit had picked that morning. Reverend Thomas Miller performed the ceremony, and when he pronounced them man and wife, Kit kissed Catherine with a tenderness that made several of the women in attendance sigh. Martha Kenmore, despite her initial gossip, had come around to being supportive, and she hosted a small reception at her house. "I knew it the moment I saw you two together," Martha declared, pressing a generous slice of cake into Catherine's hand. "You have that look about you, like you belong together." As they rode back to the ranch that evening, now husband and wife, Kit felt a contentment he'd never experienced before. Catherine sat beside him on the wagon bench, her hand in his, and the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Are you happy?" Kit asked. "Deliriously," Catherine replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I keep thinking about how I ended up here, how terrible it was being lost in that canyon. But if I hadn't gotten lost, if Henderson hadn't abandoned me, I never would have found you. Strange how the worst moments can lead to the best ones." "I've been thinking the same thing," Kit admitted. "I was searching for lost cattle that day. If I'd gone a different direction, if I'd given up the search earlier, I might have missed you entirely." "Fate," Catherine said softly. "It must have been fate." The first months of their marriage were an adjustment, but a happy one. Catherine transformed the ranch house, adding small touches that made it feel more like a home. She hung curtains in the windows, planted flowers near the porch, and insisted they have a proper dining table instead of Kit's rickety old one. "We're a family now," she said firmly. "We should eat our meals together at a proper table." Kit built the table himself, taking pride in the work. Catherine watched him, offering suggestions and encouragement, and when it was finished, they christened it with a special dinner she'd spent all day preparing. Winter came early that year, bringing snow and freezing temperatures. Kit worried about the cattle, about whether his supplies would last, but Catherine remained cheerful and optimistic. She taught him card games in the evenings and read aloud from books she'd ordered from a catalog. "Listen to this," she'd say, her voice animated as she read passages from novels or poems. Kit would sit and listen, content just to hear her voice, to watch the firelight play across her face. In the spring, Catherine announced she was pregnant. Kit was overcome with emotion, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "Are you happy?" she asked, echoing his question from their wedding day. "Happier than I knew was possible," Kit replied. "The pregnancy was difficult at times." Catherine suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoons, and there were days when she could barely keep anything down. Kit was attentive and worried, riding into town to consult with Doc Harrison, and buying every remedy the doctor suggested. "You're going to be fine," Doc assured Catherine during one of his visits to the ranch. "Some women just have a harder time than others, but you're strong and healthy, and that baby's growing just as it should." As Catherine's belly grew, Kit found himself constantly amazed by the miracle of it all. He'd place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, and it would fill him with wonder. "He's active today," Catherine would say, "or she's dancing again." "He or she?" Kit asked. "I don't know which I want it to be," Catherine admitted. "I just want the baby to be healthy." They spent the summer preparing, turning the small room off the main bedroom into a nursery. Kit built a cradle, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk, determined that nothing would scratch his child's delicate skin. Catherine sewed blankets and tiny clothes, sometimes enlisting Martha Kenmore and other women from town to help with the sewing. The women's visits were good for Catherine, Kit thought. Despite her initial worries about her reputation, she'd been embraced by the community. The women admired her intelligence and her willingness to work hard, while the men respected how she'd taken to ranch life. "Your Catherine is quite something," Tom Fletcher told Kit one day at the general store. "Not many Eastern women could adapt the way she has." "She's remarkable," Kit agreed, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Catherine went into labor on a warm September afternoon. Kit had been out checking the fence line when one of the ranch hands he'd recently hired came galloping up. "Boss, Miss Catherine says it's time," the young man, Danny Harrison, said breathlessly. Kit didn't remember the ride back to the house. One moment he was in the far pasture. The next he was bursting through the front door to find Catherine in the bedroom, Martha Kenmore already there with her. "Doc's on his way," Martha said calmly. "Kit, you need to boil water and bring clean towels." The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Kit stayed as close as the women would allow, pacing in the main room, jumping every time Catherine cried out. It was torture, hearing her in pain and being unable to help. Finally, as dawn broke, Kit heard a new sound that made his heart leap, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. He rushed to the bedroom door just as Doc Harrison emerged, tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Kit. You have a son." Kit pushed past the doctor, his eyes immediately finding Catherine. She looked exhausted, her hair damp with sweat, but she was smiling as she cradled a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Kit approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the small, red face, at the tiny fingers that gripped Catherine's thumb, and felt his eyes fill with tears. "He's perfect," Kit whispered. "What should we name him?" Catherine asked. They discussed names throughout the pregnancy but hadn't settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Kit knew exactly what felt right. "Samuel," he said. "After your father." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Her father, Samuel Vaughn, had been a good man who'd raised her with love and principles. "Samuel Jameson," she said, testing the name. "Yes, that's perfect." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry. Samuel was a healthy baby but demanding, and Kit marveled at how Catherine managed to care for him while still running the household. He tried to help as much as he could, walking the floor with Samuel when he was fussy, changing diapers, and doing whatever Catherine needed. "You're a good father," Catherine told him one night, watching as Kit rocked Samuel to sleep. "I knew you would be." As Samuel grew, so did the ranch. Kit's hard work was paying off, and he was able to expand his herd and purchase additional land. He hired 2 more hands, which gave him more time to spend with his family. Catherine had started writing again, working on her book about women in the West in the quiet moments when Samuel napped. "Read me what you've written," Kit would say, and Catherine would share passages about strength and determination, about finding home in unexpected places. "It's good," Kit told her honestly. "Really good. You should try to get it published." "Maybe someday," Catherine said, but Kit could see the idea pleased her. Samuel took his first steps on a sunny spring morning when he was 10 months old. Kit and Catherine both happened to be watching, and they cheered so loudly they startled the baby, who promptly sat down hard on his bottom and started crying. But after they comforted him, he tried again, and this time he made it 3 whole steps before falling. "Did you see that?" Kit said, scooping Samuel up and tossing him gently in the air. "That's my boy." "Our boy," Catherine corrected, but she was smiling. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and Kit's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher grew. People came from other counties, seeking his advice on cattle breeding and land management. Catherine's book was finished and sent off to a publisher in New York, though they tried not to get their hopes up about acceptance. When Samuel was 2 years old, Catherine became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their daughter was born the following summer, the delivery was quick and uncomplicated. They named her Mary after Kit's mother, and Samuel was fascinated by his new baby sister. "Baby," he'd say, pointing at Mary with wonder. "My baby." "Yes, your baby sister," Catherine would confirm. "You have to be gentle with her." Samuel took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help fetch diapers or sing to Mary when she cried. Kit watched his family with a sense of profound gratitude. 4 years ago, he'd been a lonely rancher with little hope for anything beyond survival. Now he had a wife he adored, 2 beautiful children, and a ranch that was thriving. The years passed quickly. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic boy who followed Kit everywhere, desperate to learn about ranching. Mary was quieter, more thoughtful, but with a stubborn streak that reminded Kit of Catherine. Catherine's book was published when Mary was 3, and while it didn't become a bestseller, it sold respectably and received positive reviews. Kit was so proud he bought extra copies and handed them out to everyone in Canyon City. "Have you read my wife's book?" he'd ask, beaming. "She's an author now." Catherine would shake her head at his enthusiasm, but Kit could tell she was pleased. When Samuel was 7 and Mary was 5, Catherine gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas, after Catherine's late brother. The house that had once seemed too big for Kit alone now rang with the sounds of children laughing, arguing, and playing. "Sometimes I can't believe this is my life," Kit said one evening, standing on the porch with Catherine while their children played in the yard. Samuel was teaching Mary how to rope fence posts while Thomas toddled around, getting in everyone's way. "What do you mean?" Catherine asked. "All of this," Kit gestured broadly. "You, the children, the ranch doing well. 10 years ago I was alone and resigned to staying that way. Then you came into my life, and everything changed." Catherine took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I used to think about what my life would have been like if I'd made it to Austin, if I'd gotten that teaching position. I probably would have been content enough, teaching other people's children, living in a boarding house. But I never would have been truly happy. Finding you, building this life with you, it's everything I didn't know I wanted." "Do you ever regret it?" Kit asked. "Giving up the chance for a different kind of life?" "Never," Catherine said firmly. "Not for a single moment. Kit, you gave me a home when I was lost in more ways than one. You gave me a family, a purpose, a love I never imagined possible. This is where I belong. This has always been where I was meant to be." Kit pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you, Catherine Jameson. And I love you, Kit Jameson." As the sun set over the Texas Panhandle, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Kit felt a profound sense of peace. His children were healthy and happy. His wife was his best friend and truest partner, and his ranch was more successful than his father or grandfather could have dreamed. Life was good, better than good. It was everything he'd ever wanted and more than he'd ever hoped for. The years continued to roll by, marked by small moments and significant milestones. Samuel grew into a capable young man who shared his father's love for ranching. At 16, he could handle most tasks as well as any of the hired hands, and he had a natural way with the animals that Kit greatly admired. Mary, at 14, had inherited her mother's love of learning and books. She spent hours reading everything she could get her hands on, and she'd announced her intention to become a teacher like her mother had been. Catherine encouraged this ambition, ordering books on pedagogy and discussing teaching methods with her daughter. Thomas, now 11, was the wild card of the family. He had a mischievous streak that kept everyone on their toes, but also a kind heart that couldn't stand to see anyone or anything suffering. He was always bringing home injured animals for Catherine to nurse back to health. The ranch had expanded significantly over the years. Kit now owned over 300 acres and ran a substantial herd of cattle. He'd built a new, larger barn and added several outbuildings. The ranch house itself had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. One evening in late fall, with all 3 children gathered around the dinner table, Samuel made an announcement. "Pa, there's a ranch over in Bailey County that's for sale," he said. "I was thinking, with your permission, I might try to buy it, start my own place." Kit felt a complicated mix of pride and sadness. He'd known this day would come eventually, but he wasn't quite prepared for it. Samuel was only 18, barely a man, though Kit had been running his own ranch at a similar age. "That's a big step," Kit said carefully. "Have you thought it through? Running a ranch is hard work, and it's lonely if you're doing it alone." "I won't be alone," Samuel said, glancing at his mother. "Not for long, anyway. There's a girl, Emma Fletcher, Tom Fletcher's granddaughter. I've been courting her, and I want to ask her to marry me." Catherine's face lit up with joy, though Kit noticed tears in her eyes. "Oh, Samuel, that's wonderful. Emma's a lovely girl." "She is," Samuel agreed, his young face serious. and she's willing to be a rancher's wife to work hard and build something together, like you and Ma did." Kit met Catherine's eyes across the table, remembering their own early days. "If you're sure this is what you want, son, you have my blessing, and my help if you need it." "Thanks, Pa," Samuel said, relief evident in his voice. "That means everything." The family celebrated Samuel's news, though later that night when the children were in bed, Catherine wept in Kit's arms. "I knew he'd leave eventually," she said. "I just didn't think it would be so soon." "He's ready," Kit assured her, though his own heart ached. "We raised him right. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and Emma will make him a fine wife." "I know," Catherine sniffled. "I'm happy for him, truly. It's just hard to let go." "He's not going far," Kit reminded her. "Bailey County is just a day's ride. We'll see him plenty." Samuel and Emma were married the following spring in the same church where Kit and Catherine had exchanged vows 19 years earlier. Emma was a bright, capable young woman of 19, and Catherine took to her immediately. After the wedding, the young couple moved to their new ranch with Kit's help and a gift of several head of cattle to start their herd. With Samuel gone, the dynamic in the Jameson household shifted. Mary stepped up to help more with the ranch work, proving herself as capable as any boy despite the protests of some of the more traditional townspeople. Thomas, no longer the baby of the family with Samuel around to deflect attention, became more serious and focused. Catherine threw herself into her writing with renewed energy, working on a second book. This one was about family life on a ranch, drawing from her own experiences. Kit would often find her at the kitchen table late at night, papers spread everywhere, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You should sleep," he'd tell her. "I will soon," she'd promise. "I just want to finish this chapter." The book was published 2 years later and was even more successful than her first. Letters came from women all over the West, thanking Catherine for capturing their lives so accurately, for giving voice to their experiences. Catherine was invited to give talks in various towns, though she rarely accepted, preferring to stay home with her family. "I'm not comfortable with all this attention," she confided to Kit after declining yet another invitation to speak in Dallas. "I wrote the books to tell stories, not to become famous." "Then don't go," Kit said simply. "You don't owe anyone anything beyond the books themselves." When Mary turned 18, she announced her intention to attend a teaching college in Fort Worth. This departure was even harder for Catherine than Samuel's had been, perhaps because Mary was her only daughter. "Fort Worth is so far away," Catherine fretted as they prepared for Mary's departure. "What if something happens? What if she needs us?" "She'll be fine," Kit said, though he shared Catherine's concerns. "She's smart and capable. We raised her to take care of herself." "I know," Catherine said. "It's just so hard to let them go." Mary excelled at the teaching college, writing home regularly with news of her studies and her new experiences. She graduated 2 years later at the top of her class and accepted a position teaching in Canyon City, much to Catherine's relief and delight. "I know I could teach in a bigger city and probably make more money," Mary explained when she announced her decision. "But this is home. These are my people. I want to teach here." Thomas, at 16, announced he wanted to be a veterinarian. He'd always had a way with animals, and the town's aging vet, Doc Pritchard, had taken him under his wing as an apprentice. Kit arranged for Thomas to attend veterinary school in Austin, and while it was expensive, he considered it a worthy investment. "All our children making their own ways in the world," Catherine said as they waved goodbye to Thomas at the train station. "I'm proud of them, but the house feels so empty now." "Not empty," Kit corrected. "Just quieter, and we still have each other." Indeed, with the children grown and gone, Kit and Catherine found themselves rediscovering each other in some ways. They took long rides together like they had in the early days, just the two of them and the open country. They stayed up late talking, sharing thoughts and dreams like young lovers. "I wouldn't change anything about our life," Catherine said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "But I have to admit, there's something nice about having you all to myself again." Kit pulled her closer. "I was just thinking the same thing." Samuel and Emma's first child, a boy they named Kit after his grandfather, was born when Samuel was 21. Becoming grandparents was a strange, wonderful experience for both Kit and Catherine. They doted on little Kit, spoiling him in ways they'd never spoiled their own children. "You're going to turn him rotten," Samuel complained good-naturedly as Catherine slipped the toddler a piece of candy before dinner. "That's a grandparent's prerogative," Catherine replied, completely unrepentant. "Mary married at 23, wedding a fellow teacher named Robert Winters. They settled in Canyon City, and Mary continued teaching while starting her own family. Thomas finished veterinary school and returned to practice in Canyon City, eventually taking over when Doc Pritchard retired. As Kit entered his 50s, he began to think about the future of his ranch. Samuel had his own successful operation, and Thomas was devoted to his veterinary practice. Neither seemed interested in taking over the family ranch. "What do we do?" Kit asked Catherine one night. "I'm not ready to retire, but I'm not getting any younger either." "What happens to this place when I'm gone?" "We could sell it," Catherine suggested, though Kit could tell the idea pained her as much as it did him. "Use the money to live comfortably in town, be closer to the children and grandchildren." Kit shook his head. "I can't imagine not waking up here, not working this land. Maybe I'm being stubborn, but this ranch is part of me." "Then we keep it," Catherine said firmly. "We hire good managers, people who will care for it the way we have, and we stay here as long as we're able. This is our home, Kit. We don't have to give it up." They found a young couple, recently married, who were looking for work and a place to settle. The husband, James Crawford, had grown up on a ranch in New Mexico and knew the business well. His wife, Clara, was hardworking and kind, reminding Kit a bit of Catherine in her younger days. They hired the Crawfords as managers, with the understanding that they would eventually inherit a portion of the ranch in return for their faithful service. "This way," Kit explained to his children when they all gathered for Christmas that year. "The ranch stays in good hands, and you three get to pursue your own dreams without the burden of maintaining this place." "Are you sure about this, Pa?" Samuel asked. "I could make it work, running both places if you need me to." "I know you could, son," Kit said. "But you've built something good of your own. You deserve to focus on that. This arrangement works for everyone." The years rolled on, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. Catherine's mother instincts remained strong, and she worried over their children and growing number of grandchildren with fierce devotion. Kit's hair turned silver, and his joints ached on cold mornings, but he still rode out every day to check on the cattle, refusing to let age slow him down completely. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with all 3 children, their spouses, and 7 grandchildren present. The ranch house was full to bursting, children running everywhere, adults laughing and sharing stories. Kit looked around at the chaos and felt his heart swell with gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked, finding a quiet moment with him on the porch while the festivities continued inside. "That I'm the luckiest man alive," Kit replied. 30 years ago, I found you lost in that canyon, and I had no idea how much my life was about to change." "I knew," Catherine said with a smile. "Well, not right away. I was too tired and scared to think clearly. But by the end of that first day when you gave me your room and treated me with such kindness, I knew you were special. And by the end of the first week, I knew I was falling in love with you." "You never told me that," Kit said, surprised. "I was afraid to," Catherine admitted. "Afraid you'd think I was just grateful or that I was trying to take advantage of your kindness. But Kit, from that very first week, I never wanted to leave. You asked me to stay to marry you before I could work up the courage to tell you how I felt. You saved me in so many ways." Kit took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "We saved each other. I was so lonely before you came along, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You brought light and laughter back into my life. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just maintaining the ranch. Everything good in my life traces back to that day I found you in the canyon." "Fate," Catherine said, echoing her words from decades earlier. "It must have been fate." As they stood there together, watching the sun set over the land they'd worked together for 3 decades, Kit reflected on the incredible journey their lives had taken. From a chance encounter in a canyon to a rich, full life filled with love, children, and prosperity. Every moment had been a gift. Catherine was 60 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, lines of age marking her beautiful face. To Kit, she was just as lovely as the day he'd first seen her, stumbling through the canyon lost and desperate. Maybe even more so, because now he knew the strength of her spirit, the depth of her love, the countless ways she enriched his life every single day. Kit was 63, his body showing the wear of decades of hard physical labor, but his mind was still sharp, and his heart still full of love for his wife and family. He knew he was slowing down, that the day would come when he'd have to fully hand over the ranch operations to the Crawfords, but for now, he was content to take it day by day. "Grandpa, Grandma," little Kit, now 7 years old and named for his grandfather, came bounding out onto the porch. "Everyone's asking for you. We're about to cut the cake." Kit and Catherine exchanged a smile, then followed their grandson back inside to rejoin the celebration. The house was warm and bright, filled with the people they loved most in the world. Their children had turned out well, making lives for themselves they could be proud of. Their grandchildren were healthy and happy, growing up with opportunities and security. Kit and Catherine had worked hard to provide. The party lasted late into the evening, with the younger children eventually falling asleep wherever they happened to be, draped over sofas or curled up on blankets on the floor. The adults sat around the big dining table Kit had built so many years ago, sharing coffee and memories. "Remember that time Thomas brought home that injured coyote pup?" Mary said, laughing. "Ma about had a heart attack." "It wasn't funny at the time," Catherine protested, though she was smiling. "That thing could have had rabies." "But it didn't," Thomas pointed out. "And once he healed, we released him back into the wild. That experience taught me so much about animal behavior. In a way, that coyote pup set me on the path to becoming a vet." "What about the time Samuel tried to ride that wild Mustang Pa had just bought?" Clara, James's wife, prompted. "I've heard the story but want to hear it from the source," Samuel groaned. "I was 15 and thought I knew everything. That horse threw me so hard I saw stars. Probably gave my parents a few more gray hairs." "More than a few," Kit confirmed. "I thought you'd broken your neck." "Your mother cried for an hour after we got you inside and confirmed you were all right." "I was worried," Catherine defended. "And you were just as scared as I was, Kit Jameson. Don't pretend otherwise." The stories continued long into the night, each memory sparking another, creating a tapestry of their shared history. Kit listened more than he talked, simply enjoying the sound of his family's voices, their laughter, the love that permeated every word. Eventually, the party wound down. Samuel, Emma, and their children returned to their ranch. Mary and Robert took their family home to town, and Thomas and his young family departed as well. The Crawfords retreated to their cabin on the far side of the property, and finally, Kit and Catherine were alone again. "Well," Catherine said, surveying the mess of dishes and discarded decorations. "That was wonderful." "It was," Kit agreed. "But I'm exhausted. The cleanup can wait until morning." They went to bed, and Kit held Catherine close, listening to her breathing deepen as she fell asleep. He lay awake a while longer, his mind full of memories and gratitude. 30 years of marriage, 3 wonderful children, 7 beautiful grandchildren, and a ranch that had not only survived but thrived. It was more than he'd ever dared to dream. As Kit drifted off to sleep, he thought about that day 30 years ago when he'd heard a woman's voice calling for help in the canyon. Such a small thing, really, a chance encounter that could easily have never happened. If he'd searched for his cattle in a different direction, if Catherine had wandered a different path, their lives would have been completely different. But fate, or God, or simple luck had brought them together, and Kit had been smart enough to hold on when he found her. The next morning, Kit woke to find Catherine already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her journal. She'd been keeping a journal since before they married, and over the years had filled dozens of volumes with her thoughts, observations, and memories. "What are you writing?" Kit asked, pouring himself coffee and joining her at the table. "Just reflecting on yesterday," Catherine said. "On how blessed we are. I want to make sure I remember everything, all the details." The way little Kit's face lit up when he saw the cake, how Samuel and Thomas were laughing together over some old story, the sound of all those voices filling our home. "These are the moments that matter, Kit. This is what life is really about." "You're going to make me cry before I've even finished my first cup of coffee," Kit said, but he was smiling. "Sorry," Catherine said, not sounding sorry at all. "I'm feeling sentimental this morning." "After 30 years, I think you've earned the right," Kit replied. They spent the morning cleaning up from the party, working together as they always had. Kit washed while Catherine dried, and they talked about the family, about plans for the coming season, about nothing and everything. It was comfortable, easy, the way life between two people who truly knew each other could be. In the afternoon, Kit saddled 2 horses, and he and Catherine went for a ride. They headed toward the canyon where Kit had found Catherine all those years ago. They didn't go there often, maybe once a year, but it felt right to visit on their anniversary. The canyon hadn't changed much. The red rock walls still rose majestically, carved by ancient forces into fantastic shapes. Kit guided his horse to the spot where he'd first seen Catherine, or as close to it as he could remember. "I was so scared," Catherine said, looking around. "I'd been lost for so long, and I was starting to think I'd die out here. And then I heard your horse, and I thought I was hallucinating. When you actually appeared, when you gave me water, I felt like an angel had come to save me." "No angel," Kit said. "Just a lonely rancher looking for lost cattle." "My angel," Catherine insisted. "You saved my life that day, Kit, and then you gave me a life worth living." "I can never repay you for that." "You've repaid me 1,000 times over," Kit said. "Every day we've spent together, every smile, every laugh, every moment has been a gift. I'm the one who should be grateful. You could have left, gone back east or on to California, but you chose to stay. You chose me." "Choosing you was the easiest decision I ever made," Catherine said, "and I'd make it again 1,000 times over." They sat on their horses, looking out over the canyon, remembering that fateful day and all the days that had followed. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of sage and dust, sounds of nature all around them. It was peaceful, timeless, and perfectly fitting as a place to reflect on their journey together. "Should we head back?" Catherine eventually asked. "In a minute," Kit said. "I just want to stay here a little longer." Soak it all in. They remained for another hour, talking quietly, sometimes lapsing into comfortable silence. The afternoon sun moved across the sky, casting changing shadows on the canyon walls. Finally, as the light began to take on the golden quality that preceded sunset, they turned their horses toward home. The ride back was leisurely, both of them in no hurry to return to the demands of daily life. They spotted deer grazing in the distance, a hawk circling overhead, all the small wonders of the natural world that were easy to overlook when rushing through tasks and chores. "We should do this more often," Kit said. "Just take time to ride and talk." "We should," Catherine agreed. "We've earned the right to slow down a little, enjoy what we've built." Back at the ranch, they found James Crawford waiting with a minor crisis. Two of the cattle had gotten through a broken fence and wandered onto a neighbor's property. Kit went to deal with it, working alongside James to round up the wayward cattle and repair the fence. By the time they finished, it was full dark. Catherine had dinner waiting when Kit finally came inside, tired and dirty but satisfied. After he'd washed up, they sat down to eat, just the two of them in the quiet house. "I could get used to this," Catherine said. "I love having the family here, but there's something nice about the peace and quiet too." "We've earned our peace and quiet," Kit said. "Raised 3 good kids, built a successful ranch, created a legacy. Now it's our time." They spent the evening as they spent most evenings now, sitting together reading or talking, Copper sleeping at their feet. The old dog was 12 now, moving slowly but still devoted to Kit. As bedtime approached, Kit let Copper out for his final patrol of the night, then locked up the house. In their bedroom, Catherine sat at her dressing table brushing out her hair. Kit watched her, marveling as he always did at how much he loved this woman. 30 years, and the sight of her still made his heart beat faster. "What are you staring at?" Catherine asked, catching his eye in the mirror. "The most beautiful woman in the world," Kit replied. "You need spectacles," Catherine said, but she was blushing, pleased. "My eyes work just fine," Kit insisted. "Come to bed." They settled in together, Catherine's head on Kit's shoulder, his arm around her. It was how they always slept, had slept for 30 years, and Kit hoped they'd sleep this way for 30 more. "Kit," Catherine said softly in the darkness. "MMM. Thank you for giving me such a wonderful life, for loving me so completely, for building this family with me. I know I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful every single day." Kit kissed the top of her head. "Right back at you. Every single word. I love you, Catherine. I love you too." As they drifted off to sleep, Kit thought about the future. He knew they likely had more years behind them than ahead, but he refused to dwell on that. Instead, he focused on gratitude for every day he got to spend with Catherine, for the family they'd created, for the life they'd built together from that chance encounter in the canyon. The years continued to pass with increasing speed, as they tend to do the older one gets. Kit and Catherine settled into the rhythms of their senior years, their days less filled with hard physical labor and more with the gentle maintenance of their home and property. The Crawfords handled most of the ranch work now and did it well, easing Kit's worries about the future of the land. Their grandchildren grew, and then came great-grandchildren, a whole new generation to love and spoil. Samuel and Emma had 4 children total, Mary and Robert 3, and Thomas and his wife Ann 2. The ranch house saw frequent gatherings, holidays and birthdays, and any excuse to bring the family together. On Kit's 70th birthday, the entire extended family gathered for a celebration. There were now 12 grandchildren ranging from teenagers to young adults, and 3 great-grandchildren, toddlers who ran around causing delightful chaos. Kit sat in his favorite chair on the porch, Catherine beside him, and watched his descendants with profound satisfaction. "Look at all of this," Samuel said, gesturing at the crowd. "All of this came from you two, from your love and hard work. It's an incredible legacy, Pa." "Your ma deserves most of the credit," Kit said. "I just provided the land. She provided the love that made it all possible." "Oh, stop," Catherine said, but she squeezed Kit's hand. "We did it together." That evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Kit and Catherine sat on the porch as the stars came out. Copper had passed away 2 years earlier, and they'd gotten a new dog, a young female shepherd they'd named Penny. She lay at their feet, occasionally thumping her tail against the porch boards. 70 years old, Kit mused. Never thought I'd make it this long. "You've got plenty of years left in you yet," Catherine said firmly. She was 67 now, still active and engaged, though she tired more easily than she used to. "I hope so," Kit said. "But if this was my last day, I'd die a happy man. I've had more than most men get, Catherine." "More love, more joy, more purpose. Because of you, because of us," Catherine corrected. "We built this together, Kit. Every step of the way we were partners. That's why it worked. That's why it's lasted." Kit pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted somewhere in the darkness. The wind rustled through the trees Kit's father had planted 50 years ago. The house behind them, solid and enduring, stood as testament to all they'd accomplished. Kit lived another 5 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at 75. Catherine beside him as she'd been for 45 years. His funeral was attended by the entire town and family members who traveled from across Texas and beyond. He was laid to rest in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch, under the endless Texas sky he'd loved so much. Catherine grieved deeply, as was only natural after losing her partner of so many decades. But she found comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the knowledge that Kit had lived a full, happy life, and in the memories they'd created together. She continued to live on the ranch with the Crawfords' help, still writing when the spirit moved her, still taking an active interest in the lives of her descendants. Her third book, a memoir of her life with Kit, was published when she was 72 and became her most successful work, touching readers with its honest portrayal of love, loss, and the building of a life in the American West. Catherine lived to be 81, her mind sharp until the end. On a warm spring morning, surrounded by her children, she closed her eyes and went peacefully to join Kit. She was buried beside him, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names, dates, and a single inscription. Together in life, together in eternity. The ranch they'd built continued on, managed by the Crawford family as agreed, becoming a successful operation that supported multiple families. Samuel's children eventually inherited portions of it, keeping it in the family as Kit and Catherine had hoped. The house remained standing, expanded and updated but maintaining its essential character, filled with subsequent generations of children and love. The story of how Kit found Catherine lost in the canyon became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. It was a tale of chance and choice, of fate bringing two people together, and those two people choosing to build something lasting. It was a love story, yes, but more than that. It was a story about resilience, about finding home in unexpected places, about the power of two people committed to facing life together. And in the end, that's what it had always been about. Not the land, though that mattered. Not the prosperity, though that provided security. It was about love, pure and simple. The love between Kit and Catherine, strong enough to build a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their great-grandchildren grew up hearing the story, and they told it to their children in turn. How a lonely rancher found a woman lost in the canyon, guided her home, and she never wanted to leave. How that simple act of kindness bloomed into a love that sustained them through decades, through hardship and joy, through the raising of children and the building of dreams. It was a story of the West, certainly, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart, of connection in isolation, of love in loneliness, of two people who found in each other everything they'd been missing. And it was a story with the happiest of endings, because Kit and Catherine had lived fully, loved completely, and left behind a family and a legacy that would carry their love forward into the future, forever and always.